Hi, my name is Matt, and today I'm going to take you on a tour of my 1989 Avanti Convertible. You might not have ever seen one of these cars before, and that is because they are super rare. I bought this car 2 years ago from the Mecum auction in Texas. The car had been in storage for a long time, and I spent the last 2 years just sorting out the little problems and getting it so everything works. And now the car is really nice and everything works on it, and I've actually sold it, so I have to make this video before it goes to its new owner. So let's go ahead and get started on a tour of my 1989 Avanti. If you've never heard of this car or seen one before, you are not alone. Like I said, this is a very rare car. The Avanti was originally made by Studebaker, and Studebaker was a pretty successful car maker, but they had some troubles going into the 60s, and in 1966 1965 actually, they left the United States and moved to Canada and ceased production of most of their cars. The Avanti was one of the cars that they made, and one of the cars they decided to drop when they moved to Canada. After they moved to Canada, a car dealer in South Bend, Indiana, bought the factory and all the parts, and he just kept making the Avanti. And the Avanti he made wasn't very different than the 1963 and 1964 Avanti. It looked pretty much identical, except it had less of a forward rake. It wasn't as jacked up in back, and it used a General Motors engine. The engine that they used was whatever was typically in the Corvette of the time. And as the years went on, they switched engines kind of as General Motors switched engines. So for instance, in the 80s, they started using a 305, and that's what this car here uses. It's a General Motors 305, the same as would have been used in a Caprice. Studebaker actually never made a convertible. And Newman and Altman, owners of the Avanti 2 company, they never made a convertible either. In 1982, a guy named Stephen Blake, who was a car dealer himself, he bought the Avanti company from Newman and Altman. And one of the things he did is he added these fiberglass bumpers to update the car. They didn't look exactly like this, but he put fiberglass bumpers. He went to these square headlights, which were more common at the time. And he just did a lot of little things to streamline production on the car. And Blake really re-energized the company. And he is the one that started engineering a convertible. So he made a couple pre-production convertibles in like 1983, I think. And it's said that he made a few production ones in 1985, but I'm not completely sure about that. But he may have. Around 1985, Blake ended up having a lot of problems with production on the Avanti. The problems had to do with paint. He made some poor choices with the molds on the car. This is a fiberglass car. And the results of those poor choices were that paint wouldn't adhere to the bodywork, and it would just fall off the car. And he ended up having to spend an awful lot of money refinishing customers' cars. And of course that hurt his reputation, and sales dropped off, and he couldn't keep up with the costs of repainting these cars. And Blake's Avanti company ended up closing. In 1987, a real estate developer named Kelly bought the Avanti company, and he did a lot to re-engineer the car. One of the issues that they were having is the Avanti used an awful lot of leftover Studebaker parts, even into the 80s. And those parts were running out. There weren't any more frames, and they just needed to re-engineer the car to modern standards for safety and because they were running out of parts. So what Kelly did is he re-engineered the car to use an existing frame that he could buy from General Motors. So the Kelly cars, the Kelly Avantis, they used a frame from a Chevy Monte Carlo. And in some ways this was interesting because it made the car very easy to service. And, but for some people they just felt like they were getting a kit car. So it depends on who you're talking to. I mean, one way to look at it is, Kelly was a coach builder in the same way of the big, elegant coach builders of the 20s and 30s, or he was a kit car maker. But either way, he produced some cars, and Avanti was back up and running. One of the things Kelly did that was a little different than anybody else is he really emphasized the convertible, and the convertibles were really popular. So in 1987, they made 54 convertibles. In 1988, they made 73 convertibles. So in 1989, they made 101 convertibles. The Avanti convertible is a very rare car. In total, there's about 128 of them. Give or take that number because it's a little unclear how many Blake Avantis there are. But either way, very rare car. Most people will tell you that the 1989 convertible is the most desirable because in 1989 they switched from using the Monte Carlo chassis to using the heavier Chevy Caprice chassis. If you ask Avanti collectors and enthusiasts, they will tell you that the 89 Avanti convertible has the best fit and finish, construction and engineering of all the Avanti convertibles, and a lot of people would say of any of the Avantis. What I like about the 89s is they have the ground effects, so it sits a little lower. So the bumpers have the ground effects, and the whole car just seems like it's a little bit lower. I don't know whether they really affect gas mileage or not, but I feel like the ground effects and the bumpers affect the gas mileage. I've owned two 1989 Avantis, and the first one that I had, I drove it from New Jersey to Columbus, Ohio, and I got 36 miles to the gallon. And that is really astounding gas mileage for a V8 car. Let's go ahead and take a look at the interior of the car. Starting with the Blake Avantis in 1984, Avanti interiors went a little bit upscale. They started using a lot more leather. The coolest thing being the dash. So the dashes were wrapped in all leather. So leather seats, leather door panels, leather side panels, leather dash, and in the hardtop cars, they even had leather headliners. So they were really luxurious, even by today's standards, because of all the use of leather. Starting in 1987, they went to this style dash. Rumor has it that this dash was actually a style that Blake acquired that was going to be used in the Corvette, and he adapted it to use in the Avanti, and Kelly decided to use that engineering and went ahead and used it in his cars. What I like about this dash is, in a way, it's kind of simple, but it has all the wood, it has tons of gauges, so it's beautiful and useful. The Avantis, starting in 1983, I think it was 83 anyway, they came equipped with the General Motors 700R4 overdrive transmission. That overdrive transmission is another reason I think Avantis get really good gas mileage. One endearing quality of this car is that in a lot of ways it's a parts bin car. It used parts from many different cars. It's still using old Studebaker parts. So this is the original Avanti door handle, engineered by Studebaker. Those interior door handles are from Studebaker. But these mirrors are from the Camaro. Those are the style used on the Camaro. The rear windows, for some reason, are from a Chrysler product. When Chrysler bought American Motors, they got the AMC Alliance, and for some insane reason, this car uses rear windows from an AMC Alliance convertible. The top itself is a modified top from a LeBaron convertible. One nice thing about owning this car is that even though it's semi-exotic and it's rare, it's not that hard to get parts for. And one of the reasons for that is so many of the parts are parts bin sorts of parts, and the engine and chassis are Chevy Caprice. So, if you have any normal mechanical problem, you could just take it to a Chevy dealer and get it serviced. Let's go ahead and take a look at the engine. So here's the engine. One cute quirk about the Avanti is the direction that the hood opens up. That's a little bit unusual and kind of cool. And here's the engine. This engine is a General Motors 305. A lot of Avantis used the 305 HO that would have been in a Caprice police car. This particular one is just using a carbureted 305. The 305 HO has a throttle body. This is just a normal carburetor. One thing I love about the 305 is it just seems super durable and super reliable, and of course it's easy to get parts for. A lot of people don't like it because they don't think it's powerful enough, but it just depends on what you want to do with your car. The Avanti convertible, I think of it as a cruiser. I don't really think of it as a something that needs to be going fast. I think it's something that you cruise around and look cool and are comfortable in. So I think the 305 is perfect. (1989) was the last year for this body style of Avanti, and also sort of the last year that Avanti as a company was successful. What happened was Kelly decided he needed to take on a partner, and the partner he took on was a guy named J.J. Cafaro from Youngstown, Ohio. And what they did is they moved production of the Avanti to Youngstown, Ohio. This car was actually made in Youngstown, not in South Bend. And JJ had real big ideas and real big plans, but like a lot of individuals that get involved in cars, the plans all kind of went to hell, and Avanti kind of went up in smoke. The big mistake that JJ made was he decided to start building a 4-door Avanti. And he got this idea from, just vague discussions with friends and restaurants and stuff like that. There wasn't a whole lot of market research involved. And he went gung-ho and spent a lot of money engineering a 4-door version of the Avanti. The 4-door actually turned out to be a really cool car, but they wasted so much money getting the car ready for production that they weren't really able to survive, and the 4-door put them out of business. So after 1989, they made no more convertibles like this. In 1990, they made about 90 4-doors. And then in 1991, they made about 7 more convertibles that had a different body. And that body is a little wider than this one, and it's actually kind of cool. It's the kind of car you have to see in person because the proportions are so unusual that it doesn't really photograph, not in 3D, with the impact it deserves. But after 1991, Avanti was no more, and the company shut its doors. There have been a couple revivals that lasted. So in 2001, Kelly actually got involved in Avanti again, and he managed to produce a couple hundred more Avantis. And then the company went out of business again. Had to do with a Ponzi scheme and a whole lot of shady business. But they did produce some cars. Anyway, that's a little bit of history of the Avanti, and that is a tour of this 1989 convertible. This car only has 15,011 miles on it, by the way, and I sold it on eBay. All right, thanks for watching, and please look at my channel and check out some of my other videos. I do a couple different kinds of videos. I do some how-to videos that usually have to do with cars, and I do a series of videos where I defeat claw machines around town. So check those out, like and subscribe. Okay, take it easy and bye-bye.